Did you know that in 2025, Memphis cut the number of lives lost to violence nearly in half, falling below 200 for the first time since 2019, and slashed carjackings by 48% in a single year? Or that even after that historic drop, this same city still ranked among the worst in America for stolen vehicles, with rates running roughly double what they were before the pandemic, according to the Council on Criminal Justice. Or that on one ordinary afternoon, a single young man turned the roads of this city into a hunting ground, moving from gas station to interstate to auto parts store while broadcasting himself on a live stream. And the only reason he was free to do it is that the system, which once had him, let him walk out 11 months into a 3-year sentence. Memphis sits at the center of an American contradiction. It is the home of the blues, the birthplace of rock and roll, the city of Beale Street and barbecue, and the king himself. And it is also, right now, one of the most dangerous places in this country to be stopped behind the wheel. Most people read the headline that Memphis crime is falling, and they relax. Nobody reads the second line, the one where stolen cars and gunfire on the interstate stayed near the top of the nation the entire time. So stay with me, because we are counting down 13 places in Memphis where you should never, under any circumstances, stop your car. And stay until the end, because what we saved for last is documented, devastating, and entirely preventable. Coming in at number 13, the part of town you were told was safe. Here is what no one tells the visitors. Downtown Memphis is the most watched, most policed square mile in the entire city. In April of 2025, the Memphis Police Department opened a downtown command center for the express purpose of widening its camera network, blanketing the riverfront and Beale Street in lenses, part of a community camera push the city calls Connect Memphis that now feeds a real-time crime center. And yet, the downtown statistical area still records property crime at multiples of the national city average, more than 10,000 incidents for every 100,000 people in some analyses of the city's own crime data. A great deal of it is aimed at the cars themselves, smash and grab break-ins in the garages, and lots where visitors leave their vehicles to walk the riverfront. They put the cameras downtown because that is where the tourists are. The cameras do not stop the break-in. They just file it. At number 12, the ground that leads the whole city in things stolen and broken into. Picture the worst version of a stop, the one you did not choose. Your engine quits. You coast to the shoulder, and the place you happen to land is Berkeley. That is Berkeley and Highland Heights, where FBI crime data places the property crime rate near 10,800 incidents for every 100,000 residents, the highest of any mapped neighborhood in Memphis, with violent crime not far behind. More than one property crime a year for every 10 people who live there. Remember the name Highland Heights, because the last story in this video begins on one of its streets. Nobody chooses to stop in Berkeley. They break down in Berkeley. That is the difference. Landing at number 11, the sprawl north of the Loop. In the residential grid of North Memphis, past the interstate, sits Raleigh, filed under the zip code 38128, a neighborhood the size of a small town, repeatedly ranked among the worst in the city in analyses of FBI crime data, bisected by the arterials that feed Interstate 40. It is mostly quiet houses and tired strip malls, which is exactly what makes it deceptive. The point about Raleigh is not that people go looking for trouble here, it is that the roads make it easy to arrive by accident. Raleigh is not a place you would ever mean to be at midnight. People end up there anyway, one wrong exit at a time. And number 10, the carjacking belt. Out in the southeast, where Hickory Hill and Hickory Ridge run into the commercial sprawl off Interstate 240, you reach the ground that sat at the center of the city's car theft surge. To understand how deep that surge ran, you have to go back to the thing that broke this city's relationship with its own cars. In the summer of 2022, a wave of videos spread across social media showing teenagers how to start certain Kia and Hyundai models with nothing more than a screwdriver and a USB cable, exploiting a missing anti-theft part that the rest of the industry had treated as standard for 2 decades. They called themselves the Kia Boys. and the National Insurance Crime Bureau later found that of every major metropolitan area in the United States, the Memphis region posted the single highest jump in those thefts, a 653% increase in 1 year, the worst in the entire country. The fallout grew so severe that the two automakers eventually agreed to a nationwide settlement worth roughly $200 million. I have stood in a Memphis parking lot and seen a row of older cars with steering wheel locks clamped on every one of them, the way other cities put boots on bicycles. Here is the number that matters now. The Council on Criminal Justice found that Memphis cut motor vehicle theft by 43% across 2025, one of the steepest drops of any major city in the country. And even after that, the first half rate still ran near 577 for every 100,000 people, roughly double what Memphis saw before the pandemic. The city cut car theft nearly in half in a single year, and still could not get it back to normal. That is how far it had gone. Coming in at number 9, the oldest and the most forgotten. Here is what nobody taught you in school. In 1890, a developer named Elzie Eugene Meacham, that is ELZ, bought a piece of the old Dederick plantation, ground where 25 enslaved people had once been forced to work, and he did something almost no one in the Jim Crow South was willing to do. He carved it into 982 narrow lots and sold them, some for as little as $40 apiece, to black families who could finally own the roof over their own heads. The record, kept by the Memphis Museums of Science and History and the Tennessee Encyclopedia, says the former owner's widow asked him not to sell to black buyers. He sold anyway. They built their own houses, their own churches, their own schools, and by the 1970s, this single neighborhood held one of the largest concentrations of black residents anywhere in the United States, second only to Harlem. It produced Grammy winners, surgeons, and athletes, and in 2016, First Lady Michelle Obama nominated it for federal preservation. Today, it sits among the most impoverished and highest crime areas in Memphis. I have driven Orange Mound in daylight, and the thing that stays with you is not the danger. It is the porches, block after block of houses built with a pride the rest of the country decided to forget. Most people have never heard of Orange Mound. 100 years ago, the whole country should have. At number 8, the zip code that doubles as a warning. South of downtown, along Rains Road, runs the area the city files under 38109. And when Memphis publishes its own crime dashboards, this zippy sits near the very top for serious assaults, shoulder to shoulder with Fraser and Whitehaven. When the city ranks its own zip codes week after week, the same handful of names keep surfacing at the top: 38127, 38109, 38116, and 38118. Fraser, Rains, Whitehaven, Parkway Village. 4 postal codes carrying a load of violence the rest of the map never sees. 1 postal code generating counts of violence that rival entire suburbs. A zip code is not supposed to be a warning. In Memphis, 3 of them are, and you are about to meet the other 2. Landing at number 7, the worst-ranked neighborhood in the city, and it sits right by the airport. Here is what arriving travelers never realize. The moment many of them leave Memphis International, the first neighborhood they roll through is Parkway Village and Oakhaven, filed under 38118. By composite analysis of FBI crime data, it ranks as the single worst-rated neighborhood in Memphis, with a violent crime rate above 4,000 for every 100,000 residents, and it leads the city's zippy dashboards in both burglary and assault. It abuts the airport and the freight corridors, which means it is also the most accidental stop on this list. Freight moves through here around the clock, bound for the airport and the rail yards, so the people most likely to pull over are the ones with no idea they should keep moving. It is the first Memphis neighborhood a great many visitors ever drive through. Most of them never learn what they drove through. At number 6, the gas station that should end the argument. On the 3rd of June, 2024, a 31-year-old Army veteran, 1 week into a new life in Memphis after relocating from Nashville, pulled into a BP station on South Parkway East to put fuel in her car. 3 armed men approached her. She was harmed badly, gravely enough to require 14 hours of surgery on a single artery, and her car was taken with her friend's 3 young children just feet away. The Memphis Police Department and the Shelby County District Attorney's Office identified one suspect as 21-year-old Kendrick Ray, the same man tied days later to gunfire on Interstate 240 that left 4 children and a man in critical condition. And at the time of all of it, Ray was walking free on a $500 bond for an earlier gun charge, a modified handgun, a bond a judicial commissioner had set without the district attorney's office in the room. After the attack on the interstate, a judge reset that bond at $1 million, and Ray was charged with attempted first degree, 2 counts of carjacking, and 3 counts of reckless endangerment. A local watchdog group, Memphis Crime Beat, began pressing for answers about how those numbers get set in the first place. She survived 2 tours overseas. A week in Memphis nearly finished what the war could not. Hold on to that number, a $500 bond, because the last person in this video was also free when he never should have been, and what he did with that freedom is the entire reason this list exists. You are not ready for it. Coming in at number 5, the through road that will not let you through. Interstate 40 is the great east-west artery of the United States, the road that carries cross-country traffic straight across the top of Memphis, and for 2 punishing years, it carried something else, a steady run of gunfire aimed at people who were simply driving. The threat grew severe enough that the Tennessee Highway Patrol surged troopers onto the interstates, and the Memphis Police Department credited that state partnership with cutting interstate gunfire roughly in half across 2025. The danger had also drawn Washington's attention. In the fall of 2025, federal authorities stood up what they called the Memphis Safe Task Force and moved additional agents and National Guard support into the city, making Memphis the 3rd American city, after Los Angeles and Washington, to see that kind of federal surge, according to analysis from the Council on Criminal Justice. And the model stuck. By the middle of 2026, the Department of Justice had announced a $300 million grant program built to copy the Memphis Safe Task Force in cities across the country, holding up the very roads on this list as the blueprint for the nation. Sit with that. It took a dedicated surge of state troopers to cut the number in half, and half was the improvement. You can cross Memphis on Interstate 40 in 20 minutes. The trouble is the 20 minutes. At number 4, the neighborhood boxed in by a river and a forest. In the far northwest corner of the city, against the Mississippi River and the edge of Meeman Shelby Forest, sits Fraser. That is Fraser, filed under the zip code 38127. In the city's own crime dashboards, it appears year after year as the highest crime zip in Memphis, repeatedly posting among the most aggravated assaults of any zip in the city and trading that grim distinction back and forth with Whitehaven, with violent crime near 3,200 for every 100,000 residents, and, in some analyses, a 1 in 12 chance of becoming a crime victim in a single year. Those are odds you would refuse at a casino. I have looked at the map of Fraser more times than I can say, and the geography is the cruelty of it. It is hemmed in by a river on one side and a forest on the other, and the only easy way out is the same handful of highways the trouble uses to get in. Landing at number 3, Graceland's zip code. Here is the single fact about this city that almost no visitor knows. Whitehaven, filed under 38116, logs some of the highest raw crime counts in all of Memphis, thousands of incidents a year, with violent crime above 2,500 for every 100,000 residents. And inside that same zip code at 3717 Elvis Presley Boulevard sits Graceland. More than 600,000 people a year make the trip there from over 140 countries, more than 20 million of them since the gates first opened in 1982. And according to Elvis Presley Enterprises, it is the second most visited home in all of America, behind only the White House. What the brochures never print is the zip code on that famous address. It is 38116, the very same 38116 that logs thousands of serious incidents a year. They come for the king. They never check the crime map of the kingdom. Here's the thing about Whitehaven. Memphis leads the country in stolen cars, and people still leave their vehicles parked here for hours to tour a house. So do this channel one small favor and hit subscribe. It is free, it takes 1 second, and unlike a car left in a Memphis lot, your subscription is the one thing in this entire video that nobody can drive off with. And number 2, the road that wraps the whole city in danger. Interstate 240 is the inner loop of Memphis, the highway that circles the core, and across 2024 and 2025, it concentrated a cluster of attacks on people who were doing nothing but driving. The Memphis Police Department, along with local reporting from Bragg and Fox 13 and Tennessee Department of Transportation cameras, documented gunfire at a string of named points along the loop: Norris Road, Walnut Grove, near Poplar, Perkins, Mill Branch, the Highway 385 interchange. In one of them, 4 children were harmed inside a single car in what officers described as road rage. In another, in October of 2024, a woman was struck near the Walnut Grove interchange and had to drive herself, wounded, to the hospital. And the attacks did not stay in the past tense. On a single night in late June of 2025, on the westbound lanes of the loop near the Highway 385 interchange, one woman lost her life and a man was left in critical condition. One more entry in a run of interstate gunfire that Fox 13 had been tracking since the start of that year. The pattern grew alarming enough that the Tennessee Highway Patrol began surging its own troopers onto the loop alongside Memphis officers. A state agency pulled in to help a city patrol a single circle of its own highway. A single loop of highway, with more named sites of gunfire than some cities, logged serious incidents in a year. Interstate 240 does not take you into the dangerous part of Memphis, it is the dangerous part, and it is a circle, so there is no end to it. One person was struck on this exact loop, at the Norris Road ramp, while her father changed a flat tire beside her, by a young man who had spent that whole afternoon crossing the city with a weapon and a live stream. Her name was Lakeisha McGlathen. That is Lakeisha McGlathen. She lived. The 3 people who crossed his path that day did not, and the reason he was out there at all is the thing I still cannot make peace with. Which brings us, finally, to number 1. And finally, number 1, the afternoon the city held its breath. And it was a Wednesday, the 7th of September, 2022. People were going to work. The Memphis Redbirds were getting ready to play a minor league game downtown. Students were on the campuses of the University of Memphis and Rhodes College. By the time the sun went down, the buses had stopped running, the ball players had been pulled off the field, and more than 600,000 people had been told to lock their doors. And this was not landing on a calm city. Memphis had been shaken for weeks by a run of high-profile tragedies, among them a teacher taken during an early morning run only days earlier, and a pastor confronted during a daylight carjacking in her own driveway. The nerves of the city were already raw before this Wednesday began. It began before dawn, on Lyndale Avenue in Highland Heights, the same Highland Heights from number 12. Dwayne Tunstall, who went by Amir, was 24 years old, and he was at a friend's house to talk about a barbecue food truck the 2 of them were planning to open together. 19-year-old Ezekiel Kelly was at the same gathering. According to a witness account in the police record, Kelly made strange remarks about harming someone, and then, in the driveway, he turned on Tunstall. Amir Tunstall did not survive the night. He was the first, and he was a man whose last conversation was about a food truck. The hours that followed were quiet, and then, at 35 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, the day reopened. At a gas station on South Parkway East, the same street from number 6, 62-year-old Richard Clark was getting into his Toyota Camry. Surveillance video showed Kelly pull his car alongside, lower his window, and open fire through Clark's. Richard Clark did not survive. He was the second. 1 minute later, at the Norris Road ramp on Interstate 240, the loop from number 2, Kelly pulled up to Lakeisha McGlathen, who was waiting while her father changed a flat tire. He asked her politely for directions to Whitehaven. She answered. When she looked back, he opened fire. She lived, with 3 rounds fired at her, and a memory her family says will never leave them. Around 10 minutes before 6, inside an auto zone on Jackson Avenue, Kelly walked in while broadcasting on Facebook Live and gravely harmed a man before walking back out. It was that broadcast, together with a tip from his own mother and sister, that set off the citywide manhunt and the order for hundreds of thousands of people to shelter in place. And at 21 minutes past 7 on Poplar Avenue, after crashing his own car, he reached a gray Toyota SUV. Inside was 38-year-old Allison Parker, with her daughter in the vehicle beside her. Allison Parker did not survive. She left 3 children behind. She was the third. The end came on the interstates that frame this entire list. Kelly carjacked a Dodge Challenger near the Mississippi line in South Haven. Police spotted it on Interstate 55, and after a high-speed pursuit, they took him into custody in Whitehaven. Just after 9:15 that night, 2 weapons in the car. By the time it was over, the Memphis Police Department was working at least 8 separate crime scenes scattered across the city. I have read the timeline of that day more times than I can count. Every stop, every minute, every street name that also appears on this list, and I still cannot tell you how a Wednesday afternoon became that. Nobody can. But here is the part the city could not forgive. And it is the reason this is the story we saved for last. The system already had Ezekiel Kelly. In April of 2021, he had pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, a charge reduced down from attempted first degree, and he had been sentenced to 3 years. He served 11 months. He had been free for less than 6. Standing at the podium the next morning, Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland pounded it with his fist and said plainly that if Kelly had served the full 3-year sentence, he would still have been behind bars that day, and the people who were lost would still be here. What followed was an argument the whole country could watch. The early release set off a bitter public clash between the mayor and the county's chief prosecutor over who was responsible for putting a man with that record back on the street. A fight that spilled out in front of the cameras the very next morning and reopened a years-long debate in Tennessee over early release and truth in sentencing. In the end, the argument kept collapsing back to 3 plain numbers: a 3-year sentence, 11 months served, free for less than 6. On the 13th of August, 2025, Ezekiel Kelly pleaded guilty to 28 charges, an account built from roughly 400 witnesses and more than 300 videos, and a Shelby County judge sentenced him to 3 life terms without parole plus 221 years. The district attorney's office said the deal spared the families a capital trial that could have dragged on for decades. The question that remains is not who, and it is not how. Both of those are on the record in detail forever. The question is why a system that had already convicted him, already held him, handed him back to these exact roads with 2 full years left on his sentence. That is the one nobody has answered. Lyndale Avenue, South Parkway East, the Norris Road Ramp, Jackson Avenue, Poplar. Every one of them is a street that people in Memphis drove to work on this morning and will drive home on tonight. Ezekiel Kelly will spend the rest of his life in a cell. The roads he hunted are still open this evening, and somewhere in this city is the next person we already have and will let go.